The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to DelphiCon for this last panel of the day. This is the migration and upgrade panel, and we're bringing together Stephen Ball, Manarino, and Mary Kelly. We're going to let them introduce themselves. So over to you, Stephen.
Cheers, thanks, Eli. So yeah, as I was saying, my name's Stephen Ball. I'm the pre-sales director here at Embarcadero. I've been working with Delphi for over 20 years now, and led development teams, been through the kind of Unicode migrations, the 64-bit migrations, and all that kind of stuff as a customer, and also with a lot of different customers around the world, helping them through and get moving. So quite a bit of experience on the background. In terms of what I do at Embarcadero, obviously I'm one of the senior pre-sales guys here, but I've also done a number of other roles in the past. I've been the product manager for Interbase, and also was the senior product marketing manager for a couple of years as well, before I had a couple of years over at Nokia doing some IoT stuff there with the global networks. I've been back around at Embarcadero for about another year now. So I'll hand over to Al just to say hello.
All right, thank you, Stephen. So my name is Al Manarino, and I'm one of the Embarcadero software consultants. So like Stephen, I have many years of software development experience, at least 25 plus years of software development experience, including object-oriented analysis and design, and developing and deploying production applications. Now, prior to joining Embarcadero, I spent 3 years working with CodeGear. Some of you remember that. That was a division of Borland that was acquired by Embarcadero back in the year 2008. Then before that, I worked for 5 years as a lead systems engineer for Borland, working on application lifecycle management, software delivery optimization, and developer tool solutions. And then prior to joining Borland, I held system engineering positions at companies like Information Builders, Red Brick Systems, Versant Object Database, Objectivity Object Database, and I started my career as an electrical engineer with Grumman Aerospace Corporation. Now, over the years, we, as Embarcadero software consultants, have been involved in many Delphi application migrations. And as an Embarcadero software consultant, we are often asked to help migrate legacy Delphi code to the current versions. And we have found out in all cases, after the migrations, the Delphi developers have commented that their migrations were much easier than they thought. So that's my quick introduction. Mary, we'll turn it over to you next.
All right, thanks, Al. I'm Mary Kelly, and I'm a software consultant at Embarcadero. I've been working with the C++ Builder and Delphi products as a software developer for just over 14 years now. I'm also an Interbase and C++ Builder guru, as a lot of people internal to Embarcadero call me, and I've been at Embarcadero for about 6 years now. Prior to Embarcadero, I was working as a database administrator and developer for a wide variety of databases, including MS SQL and Oracle. Now, C++ Builder and Interbase were kind of firsts in terms of programming and databases that I learned, so the Embarcadero product line is very near and dear. And I've been a part of several Unicode and database migrations over the years as a software engineer.
Great, cheers, thanks, Mary.
Right.
So I say, the whole point of the panel today is really just to be able to kind of go through and answer any specific questions you guys have. So to get the best out of this, please do post your questions through. And maybe what we'll do just to kind of kick off and to kind of help get things going is just to share a little bit of some of the different areas and topics that we often get asked about around migration, and some of the kind of key areas to kind of look out for to help you get going. So these are some of the kind of the top kind of areas. We actually had a session that we ran a couple of months ago now, and it actually leads up on the Upgrade and Migration Center on the Embarcadero website, looking into our top 5 So we had a whole host of different options to kind of choose from, which we brought down to our kind of top 5 migration things to focus on. And a few of those are kind of covered in here. So Al, do you want to pick one out and kind of give me a little bit of insight to some of the things that you've learned on some of these areas as we've been going through some of the migrations?
So yes, Stephen. So this is a good list of top migration areas. So this pretty much covers everything we see doing Delphi migrations. And if I was to list the top 5 migration items that I usually get involved with, the first one is always third-party libraries and third-party components, and then followed by possible Unicode migrations. And then the next item that comes up is database or database access controls. And then once we got all of that done, then we can start looking at UI modernization. And then once we got all that built and running, possibly we might come up against some runtime errors, maybe going from Windows 32-bit to Windows 64-bit. So that would be the top 5 migration items I usually see migrating legacy Delphi apps to the current versions. Mary, you have your list of top 5?
I do. It's actually pretty similar to yours, including the third-party components and libraries. Those sort of one of the more common hiccups in migrations that I've worked on that I've seen, making sure that you have access to your third-party components and that they're installed and readily available to the IDE. Tends to make the smoothest of transitions, but in some cases they may be missing, or you may be needing to find alternatives, and that can be sort of a big, like I said, hiccup there. Unicode database, and like you said, the database control accesses, middleware. I tend to actually work with quite a few customers who find middleware to be a very kind of scary challenge. And in some cases it can be. In a lot of cases with Delphi, it's not too difficult. And then also with the UI modernization, such as VCL styles and things like that.
All right, thank you for that, Mary. So Stephen, if you would have to come up with your top 5, would it be something similar to what Mary and I are doing?
Yeah, I guess so. I think just picking up on the thing there Mary is saying about middle tiers, I've actually seen in a number of instances middle tiers used as a migration strategy. I remember doing some work with on a health club management system that I was actually involved with writing a number of years ago, which was back in Delphi 5 time. And it's one of those things, you look back on the projects and there's no such things as failures in life, there's learning lessons. And I think one of the things that I kind of learned from that project was when to say no to developers within the team about excessive use of third-party libraries. We had one project where we had it was in the tens of different third-party component packages that were used for this project, and some of them there was 1 or 2 controls used, and quite easily with a little bit of work we could have inherited from another one and got the functionality that we needed without having to add an additional package in. But things were learned. But to move that project forward, it was very hard to move it off Delphi 5 at the time. We had some Delphi 2009 code that was written. We needed to do some interop with some .NET, and rather than kind of having to port the whole project across, we just ported some of the back-end business logic so it could be run in both pre and post Unicode, and to have that running between Delphi 2009 and Delphi 5. And we then exposed and packaged that back-end logic up and exposed it out through a set of web services. And that then enabled the interop to work between kind of the .NET applications and also for some other projects that were running around. And that kind of gave extra time to do some of the migration, but also got some of that back-end code and logic sorted, ready for the front-end part to be moved up. So we'd already tested and sorted some of that stuff out. And I think that's quite a good way to be able to piecemeal move bits from the back forward, and without having to kind of take the whole project all at once and move things through. And I think one of the things that I kind of see quite a bit, especially nowadays, people who are still stuck trying to work out how they're going to move forward, is on the database side, still stuck using old BDE and paradox tables and those kind of things. And You know, I know Mary did a great job in the sessions that we did, where we did the end-to-end migration, showing how to actually kind of port the whole database from Paradox over to Interbase using a database pump, which was great because that then got rid of a number of dependencies that were, you know, coming back to the kind of the almost like the third-party libraries, third-party components area, where you need to make sure that, you know, if you've got stuff there and you want to port it forward, you know, one of the big reasons normally is because you're wanting to get to 64-bit. And you know, if you haven't got the 64-bit libraries, or you can't get the 64-bit libraries, then that's going to be a problem being able to get into 64-bit land. But that then comes back to that kind of that generic thing of, okay, do the simple bits first, work out the phased approach that you can take to migration, get to 32-bit version done first, then add the 64-bit and kind of do it bit by bit so you can test it and make sure it's running along the way. So I'd definitely say kind of going back to what Al's saying, kind of my top 5, I would definitely say, you know, third-party libraries, making sure you've got your third-party libraries because they're things outside of your control, and third-party components kind of, you know, almost kind of patch into together with that. And then yeah, the UI modernization, again, as a big thing, especially nowadays with Windows 10. And you know, I did a blog post, you know, just last week or the week before now, looking at the latest stats around Windows, and you know, Windows 10 is now 75% of the Windows market, which is huge. You know, that's, you know, 3 out of every 4 computers that are running Windows 10, and you know, with the updates and the changes they've had to adjust to the modern hardware and the high DPI element of it, you know, getting the UI modernization is part of what you need to build into the strategy. But I wouldn't say do it as the first thing. I'd say if you're moving from an old version, get the code working as is, and then add those bits in, but almost have that as kind of your second phase, third phase. So, and then kind of, yeah, the Unicode and would be the kind of the second thing on my list, and the number 1 would be the third-party components. You know, third-party components is always the thing that people kind of get stumbled around. Because again, you know, if you haven't got the source code, it's always the hardest place to start. But you know, we know how to get hold and find a lot of the kind of stuff that's out there. And I don't know about you guys, but I often get questions about, you know, I'm stuck, I'm trying to find this, and we're able to kind of help point them in the right direction or find people who can help them with that. So.
Right, great information, Stephen. I see there's some questions, so you want to jump to questions now, or
Yeah,
continue
let's
with
do
this
that.
overview?
So
Right,
what
the
we can leave
first
this.
question I see is, are there any tools that we have to find where strings have been used as byte arrays rather than simply as a string? Yep, great question. You know, I heavily rely on the Delphi compiler. It's pretty smart to know what needs to be changed, and it'll throw its error or it'll throw its warnings. But I'm not sure if there's any tool per se that can search your source code looking for strings that have been used as byte arrays, and unless someone else knows.
No, I don't know of any other tools, like you said, other than the compiler for that.
Yeah, like I said, the compiler is very smart. It'll tell you, you know, it'll either throw an error, some incompatible type, or some type of warning like char and set. Then you know where it thinks some change needs to be made. So I heavily rely on the compiler to find things like this where strings have been used as byte arrays.
Yeah. And the other thing that might be worth having a look at, Pete, is the Unicode analysis tool. If you're moving up from 2007, as you put in the question there, to Sydney, and obviously you're moving from pre-Unicode to a Unicode version. The Unicode analysis tool is also a really useful tool to help kind of look through and identify, you know, things that can be, you know, things that you want to have a look at as you kind of go through. But as Al said, you know, the compiler gives some really good helps and hints. And you know, if you hit compile, you have a look down through the messages and the warnings, work your way through them, and it will help point you to the right direction. It's really quite an understated aid to help along the way. So,
All right, you want to pick one of these other ones?
yeah, I'm just
So
going to put
interesting,
the
if I installed a component from Get It, and there's some type of error in that component, where do I report the error? So for those of you who are not familiar, our newer Delphis now have this service called the Get It Package Manager, where we currently host about 250 of the more popular third-party libraries and components. So instead of you wasting or spending any time trying to find a component or a library that works with the current Delphi 10.x, you can search inside of Get It to find a package, find a component, install it directly from Get It. So we Embarcadero host this. So I see Jim has responded with, if it's one of the libraries components that we Embarcadero own and we Embarcadero support, then yes, I suspect you could come back to Embarcadero to report that error. Or if it's a component from one of our third-party vendors, then you can typically go back to that vendor's help support to report that error and get it fixed, and then we can repackage it inside of Get It.
Yeah, I was going to say the only time it might be a report to Embarcadero is if Get It itself is failing in the way it installs it, but that's probably still going to be a matter of needing some more information from the component vendor. So I would contact them, and then they can work with us to make sure it's installed correctly.
So welcome, Jim. It's always a pleasure having you. So what about like the turbo power components that my understanding is we Embarcadero, we inherited those turbo power libraries components like Async Pro and Orpheus. Is that something that we're responsible to correct if any errors, or go back to the author for that?
So those are being maintained by, and I am totally spacing his name. I can see his face, and I've had lunch with him. I can't think of his name now. Come on. Anyway, they're being maintained by an MVP, and he does a great job on maintaining those. But so you really, it would be he would be the one to fix that, and so you could go back to him and report it. Generally speaking, I would say that there have been not a lot of issues with those. They're pretty mature, but if they are Turbo Pack, yeah, Turbo Pack's what it's called. I was looking for Turbo Power and couldn't find it. I'm like, why can't I find this? It is, gosh, what's the guy's name? Roman. That's his name.
I too have his face in front of me, but I can't think of his name.
So Roman, he's maintaining those. Here, I'll put the link in for that. For TurboPack, and you can post an issue on GitHub there. The next question actually was kind of interesting. I did a little digging because it seemed like I'd heard about this before, about the 32-bit DLLs from a 64-bit application. So I'm going to take that one because I did a little more digging here. This is something I've done before, right? Is if you have a component that you don't have source for that's only available for a certain version of Delphi, you can convert it to a DLL so that you can use it. But then what happens when it's a 32-bit DLL in a 64-bit application? There is not a way to do that unless you use COM. So here's an article that talks about how to do that with COM. So you could, depending on what version, Delphi 6, so Delphi 6, yeah, it had COM. So you could build a COM object from Delphi 6 and use it from there potentially. So there's the link to that article. The other way you can fix this, which I've done before, is to create I can't remember what the pattern's called. I guess an adapter pattern or a facade pattern. I can't remember exactly which way it would be.
Well, the adapter pattern is if you've tried to search for the component and you don't have the source code for it. So then you can pick this adapter pattern to create stubs and skeletons to get around the missing third-party library and component, and then eventually replace it with something else.
Yep, and I've had really good luck with that, so I definitely recommend that.
Okay.
Is there
I see
a
a nice-
character set you recommend for Interbase when moving from an old Interbase version? Now it's now ISO 8859_1.
So Mary, you want to take that one?
Sure. So in most situations, I tend to use the UTF-8 when I'm migrating from older versions, especially if I'm also migrating my Delphi applications at the same time, just because it allows for making sure that I have kind of uniformity across that. So that tends to be my recommendation, unless, I mean, Stephen, you might know from more of an internationalization standard. Are there any specific character sets that you would use?
No, that sounds fine to me. I'm there's just having a quick look. There's another question here, similar kind of thing around converting into Interbase. So it kind of follows on from Danny's question there around guidance for converting from the BDE to Interbase. And Martin, I've posted a link to the YouTube video for the webinar that we ran. We took the Mast app demo from, trying to remember what it was, 2007, Delphi 2007, and converted it across to the latest 10.4. And as part of that, Mary shows the process through using the Interbase database pump and you know, checking out the tables and sorting those through and getting those all set up and getting going. So that's quite a useful webinar to kind of have a look at as well. But the thing I would definitely say, moving from the BDE to Interbase, Refind is your friend. Or you can use kind of the Delphi parser, which is a commercial version, but Refind is very, very good. In fact, to kind of give you the idea of, you know, Refind, often people look at it and go, well, we've got these scripts here for moving from the BDE to FireDAC, or moving DB Express to FireDAC, or whatever, you know, different things up to FireDAC. You can actually use it for, you know, swapping out third-party components as well. The Perl script that you write in is really easy to write. You can look at the ones that are there and use them as an example base. But you can add units to your uses clause, you can remove units. If there's properties that have changed, you can automate that to happen. I did some work with some guys up in the stock exchange in London about 5 or 6 years ago now. And they were looking to move up to get 64-bit support for their Delphi applications. And they estimated it was going to take them around about 7 to 8 months to move their applications. It ended up taking them less than 7 weeks, and they had quite a few different applications. But using Refind, they were able to kind of script it to make a copy of the code, to run the changes and the modifications they wanted, and then to check the application afterwards. Any issues or updates they needed, they reset it, ran the script again, and using that automation, they were able to dramatically reduce down the amount of time it took to migrate a whole load of stuff over. And they were absolutely bowled over by it. So Refind is definitely something to help along the way, and it will help with the BDE to Interbase as well. So.
Yep, I would agree. Yes, so that nice Interbase pump will take any BDE source and export out the data, and then you can attach it to the target database you want to migrate it to, like Interbase in this case, and it'll create the Interbase equivalent tables and insert the data from the BDE into Interbase. And as Stephen mentioned, there's a wonderful utility now included with Delphi called the Refine utility that will migrate you off of the BDE to FireDAC. It'll take all of the BDE syntax and replace it with the equivalent FireDAC syntax. So if some of you remember that the FireDAC was originally created as a replacement for the BDE, so the architecture is very similar. There's pretty much a one-to-one match between a BDE component item to a FireDAC equivalent. So it's very easy to run this Refine utility against your application and have it automatically migrate all of the BDE syntax and components to the FireDAC equivalent.
Yeah.
Stephen mentioned, yeah, if
Mhm.
you take a look at that webinar, we go through some nice details about taking, I think it was BDE paradox tables and migrating you off of BDE to from paradox tables to an interbase database, including changing from the BDE to FireDAC to access the new interbase database.
Yeah.
So there's a question here from Mick. It says, I have a Delphi 7 application that I tried to bring onto 10.4 recently. It wasn't using any third-party components, but said he had to rebuild the forms because the old Delphi 7 components wouldn't load. That's interesting. I'm not sure what components wouldn't load. I wonder if maybe you were using binary DFMs instead of text DFMs, if that could be an issue. But otherwise, is there something you guys can think of maybe that could be causing that?
Only
Well,
if
it's
there's
quite
third-party
possible. So I've
components.
seen cases where, let's say you went from a Delphi 7 to Delphi 10 and you use some third-party component like a Dev Express grid back in the old Delphi 7 days, and now you're using the Dev Express grid in Delphi 10.4. So it's quite possible that, some grid component like Dev Express grid, they may have removed or deprecated some of the methods or identifiers in that component. So when Delphi 10 tries to open up your Delphi 7 form, it won't open the form because it can't find an identifier that's not in there.
So he's saying
And
he's not
usually,
using any
usually it knows
third-party
this
components.
when you try to open up the Delphi 7 app in Delphi 10. It first complains about identifier not found, like let's call it record count or something. And usually that's an indication that identifier record count no longer exists on a component that you might have on a form. So the quick fix for that is to open up that form in a text editor like Notepad++, search for that identifier like record count, and replace it to what its new equivalent is, and that will then allow you to open up the form in Delphi 10.
He's saying he wasn't using any third-party components, but still wasn't able to load in there.
Well, I've never seen that. If he wants to send me over a sample, I'm more than happy to have a look, see if we can help point him in the right direction, or see if we can help identify the issue for him.
Yeah.
But
I would
yeah, feel
suggest
free.
an
My email
example.
is just stephen.ball@embarcadero.com. So just feel free to drop me an email.
That's usually the case I see, even if it's an existing Delphi 7 component that you're trying to open in Delphi 10. It's quite possible that over the years we refactored it, or we removed some identifier, or we removed some property from one of the methods on that form that doesn't exist anymore. And you usually see it when you just try to open up the project in Delphi 10. You'll get that message like, identifier not found, record count, or whatever it might be. And usually in that case, if you open up the form itself in a Notepad editor, you'll find that property that no longer exists, and you'll have to just replace it with what Delphi 10 now calls it. So you should not have to rebuild the forms. Just find that missing identifier, find that missing property that's no longer there or replaced by something else, and then that should allow your forms to open in Delphi 10. Yep, as Stephen mentioned, we're here to help. So send us the sample form that's giving you issues, and we'll take a look at it and let you know what you need to do to get it to open in Delphi 10.
Yeah, we have talking about here to help. There's one question here. Sorry, there's no name on it. But how can the Embarcadero team help with their migration? They're kind of stuck on Delphi 6 and they're not quite sure what to do. So contact your local Embarcadero sales rep, and they'll be able to connect you up and get in touch with us through them, or feel free just to contact one of us directly, and we can help connect you with the right people, and we can then work you forward, so to speak. The way we work with the pre-sales guys is, once we've got you connected up with one of the account managers here, they can then help schedule our time for you, and to have that discussion work out what your needs are and your requirements are. We are trialing through some professional services. We've done a number of them, which Al and Mary have been leading, primarily from the US at the moment, but something we're looking to push further afield, so we can help and do some of that code work for you, and get that sorted through. But equally, have a look at the MVP directory on the Embarcadero website. We've got some great MVPs around the world. So if you are struggling with different languages and you want somebody in your own local language, then our MVPs are a great resource to touch out to as well.
All right, I see one of the last questions here. Any specific tips on migrating a huge project? Well, whether it's a huge project or a small project, those 5 main migration items still apply. Number one, it's try to determine what third-party libraries and components you're using. Get those built first in 10.x, and then you have to ask yourself, do you need to migrate to Unicode, or can your application remain as an English-only non-Unicode application? And then you take a look at the database and database access. If it's using the BDE, for sure you want to migrate off the BDE to a newer, more performance-supported data access control like FireDeck. Then once you get all of that done, then you can start looking at the fun stuff of UI modernization, like adding new Windows 10 controls, like the new Windows 10 calendar, and look at using high DPI support for your images and icons. So again, if you go back to the original Migration Center website, it pretty much lists these top 5 items for migrating and some detailed steps on how to go about doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I say, Patrick, I think the going back to what I said earlier, look at a phased approach for your migration. And if you have a look at the webinar that we did, that links in with the top 5 tips, which is on the Embarcadero YouTube channel. In fact, if you go to the Embarcadero YouTube channel, in fact, let me see if I can just pull up a new tab. I can see if we can pull it up here quickly. So on the Embarcadero Tech YouTube channel, I'll just pause that. If you scroll down, there's a modernize and upgrade, modernizing your apps, upgrade and migrate section here. So in here, there's a number of different sessions that are really good to have a look at, including the modernizing your legacy Delphi projects. I kind of cringe at the word legacy sometimes. I think successful and long-lived is probably a better way to phrase it, because if it's active and you're still using it, it's certainly not legacy. So
that's what legacy means, is successful.
So that's definitely worth having a look at. The top 5 considerations is the one that's on the Embarcadero Migration Center homepage. So there are definitely 2 videos to have a look at. But there's also kind of sessions in here about kind of Windows 10 Anniversary Edition support. Finding out about what's in Windows 10, having a look at that kind of research is really good. The session, and Neil's mentioned through in the chat here about the high DPI session that Ray did earlier, which was really, really good. There's some fantastic support around Windows 10 in there. We kind of touch into that a bit in the Modernizing Your Legacy Delphi App Projects webinar. But working out your phased approach of what do I need to do first, what can I do second, what can I do third. So the modernizing your UI, moving to 64-bit, they're the things that I can say you can do second and third in the list. If you can make it small stepping stones, so you can identify if anything breaks, where it's broken, and that makes the whole process simpler, and it kind of makes it easier to kind of just get through it by doing it that kind of way. Now I need to work out how to get back to the other page here. So I kind of hope that helps. Yeah, and Danny's put a comment into the chat here about old components, some like the old socket connections and the VDE tables, T-tables, and everything can still be installed. Yeah, Marco mentioned actually they're looking at what they can do in the future to make it even easier, and separating some of the core BDE engine away from those actual components to make it easier to kind of get those installed to help people migrate and move through. But if you're still using the BDE, I would highly recommend you spend time looking into FireDAC. One of the fantastic things around FireDAC in comparison to the, and I went through it, and it was painful moving from BDE to DB Express, because all of a sudden the kind of the bidirectional tables that we used to work with, you're having to then have dataset providers in there and T-client dataset to be able to have the bidirectional data and everything to make it easy to work with. FireDAC was written from the ground up to be a replacement for the BDE. So all that functionality, the request live, the bidirectional, everything on those table queries is there. It's straight out of the box. And it's blazingly fast, and it has a whole load of additional optimizations, especially if you're doing anything that's using blobs within the database. There's so much you can do. And also, if you've got different database types, and especially if you're working between different databases as well, being able to use the FireDAC data mapping in the core database connection component, you can say, right, if it's this type of field, for example, a T-date time or T-SQL time, map it to this format. So it makes it very, very easy to kind of bring all that kind of stuff together very, very easily, which is great.
If you missed Ray's session, I do have a replay available now on that, and I just put the link in the chat for that, so you can check that out. There will be an edited version that will be posted on YouTube later as well.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Jim.
Did I see some question on short strings? Why did we remove them? Well, there it is. What was the motivation to get rid of short strings? So, interesting question. So, for what I remember with short strings, I'm not sure, maybe Jim knows, maybe it had something to do with the Linux cross compiler. Because I remember with short strings, I think the three most common ways people used short strings was, one was as a fixed length field that they used to carry ASCII strings, or they also use short strings as a convenient method for manipulating strings, or they might have used short strings as a mechanism to hold variable length binary data. And I'm trying to remember what was our motivation for removing short string, other than it was an old data type, and we wanted to replace it with something new and more modern. Maybe Jim, you recall any details on why we got rid of short string?
If I recall correctly, it was removed when the Unicode version came out, because short string was a outdated construct of 1 byte is 1 character, and there is not a way to have multi-byte characters in short strings, so Unicode characters would not work in short strings. And then actually the question here about that actually points out the reason for that is because short strings were great for storing handy buffers for bytes. No, you don't store bytes in strings of any kind, because then you are storing them wrong. So you should store them in a byte array instead. So that was really the two reasons. One, it was not a compatible construct with Unicode strings, and so it's removed as part of the Unicode migration or Unicode changeover. And two, it was ripe for abuse and was being abused a lot. And so by removing that, it removed it made it obvious where there was a lot of misuses.
Yes, I remember having, yeah, go ahead, Mary, go ahead.
I was just going to say how what you were mentioning about Linux, it's actually the Android and iOS don't support short string, if I recall correctly. Anyway, for similar reasons like Jim was saying as well. But yeah, it's not actually Linux alone, it's also the mobile compilers.
Yep, I remember this discussion coming up with a Delphi for Linux customer wanting to know what he can replace short string with, something more new and more modern if they move to Delphi for Linux. I remember having this discussion with Marco, and I remember him saying something like, regarding short strings, you should be able to use array, let's say like 0 to 19 a byte for fixed, or you can use like T bytes is dynamic as ANSI string string, but in theory, you could also create a replacement data structure, but it's hard to make it 100% compatible. So there were some workarounds for short string, and I agree what you said. I think those items you mentioned as to why we removed short string from the product and replaced it with something else.
So it turns out it's not removed. Someone commented, I was wrong. It was just not, as Mary said, it was not available on mobile. So short string is still available. It's just not, it's not recommended, and definitely don't store bytes in it. So that's a good reason. But it looks like short string is a single byte, though. Looking at the doc wiki page on it, it says memory, it's up to 255 characters, and you can store 2 to 256 bytes. And so, yeah, it would be a single byte string. So it would be a non-Unicode string. So definitely don't use them unless there's a specific reason. I guess if there's a reason you want to have a short string, but do not do it for bytes. That's bad practice. But it is still available. It's just not on mobile. But it is the ANSI string is now available on mobile. It was removed, but then it was added back in. So ANSI string is still available on mobile, but it or is back available on mobile, while it was not for a while. Interestingly. And I think that was restored in, I can't remember if it was 10.3 or 10.4. I think it's 10.4 that it came back to mobile.
10.4, yeah. Okay, so there's one question here just about it'd be really nice to have an A to Z in Delphi. Writing of a RESTful web service would be interesting. There's a whole load of stuff on RAD server around. There's more than you could kind of find. So have a look at, I've got a number of sessions on my blog on delphiaball.co.uk. I'm also going to post into the chat a link to some stuff for DataSnap, which our late friend Pavel did a number of years ago. I remember working with him getting those put together on DataSnap for the Delphi Labs, which was a really, really good set of sessions. So they're both very, very useful kind of resources to have a look through. But there's quite a lot of stuff out there for those already. So there's a lot on YouTube, which is a really good place to start. And definitely keep a lookout on the blogs.embarcadero.com, with especially the new platform, which is getting a lot of good reviews at the moment as well. So.
There's a question here about performance or tips. It says a Delphi 6 application, it was faster than the equivalent updated to 10.4. So that sometimes happens, but there are ways you can improve performance. There was a fantastic session yesterday on high performance Delphi. Yeah, yesterday. I can get you the link for that. But using things you can do just to reduce there's a lot of ways you can improve performance. There's not a one size fits all for sure, but that high performance Delphi is going to definitely have some tips in it that you could use. So here is the that, and then also there is if you go to the perks page on DelphiCon, there is a discount, 25% discount on high performance Delphi book, which in the last session we talked a lot about importance of buying books. And it's one of those things that if you get just a little bit of value from one of those books, you pay for it really quick, especially after 25% discount. And that 25% discounts on both print and electronic versions. So you can get the print version from Amazon for 25% off, or the electronic version from Packet's website. There's 5 different books with 25% discounts, and then a few other, actually there's a lot of great things on there you can check out. So on the perks page. And so the newer version of Delphi does have the parallel programming library, which is a huge improvement for working with multi-threaded code than the old T-thread. So that is a huge benefit to making it faster, a feature that you now have access to that you didn't have access to before.
Yeah, there's been a couple of questions about tips and where to kind of find information, useful information. So one of the places definitely say is the Migration and Upgrade Center. So this is a picture from the website, which is just grabbed down and put into here for you. So if you go to embarcadero.com and then right at the top there's the Upgrade Center link, and on there's links to white papers and videos and a whole host of things covering all the different areas from Unicode, 64-bit migration, database and middleware, third-party components, even some tips for monetization to help you gain additional value from your customers through the process that you're going through. So that's definitely the kind of the place to head to start off. And there's a short URL there that you can put in if you just want to kind of a quick reference point to that as well. So Pete's put in here a question, which something we kind of often hear about, and especially one of the areas that we mentioned up was around testing. What do you do when you haven't got unit tests in your code? You still want to kind of get upgraded and move forward. One of the things I'd definitely say, Pete, is have a look at some of the stuff that you can do with Ranorex. There's a 6-month license included with the Architect Edition, and at the moment they're doing an offer to kind of get Architect for the price of Enterprise, which is pretty cool. So if you are looking to upgrade at the moment, that might well be worth having a look at. But it's very cool, especially with the BCL applications. You can record your tests, so you actually use the UI, so you can get one of the people who uses the product all day long to record the tests and create the tests for you. And it uses the Windows handles to then pick up the controls. You can, if there's parts of the test that you do over and over and over again, you can record that once and then almost use it as a resource to plug into any new test that you want to do, so you don't have to record the whole thing. So as you go and change parts of it, then it'll update all the tests to match the new part of that kind of almost test component that's been used. And then you can run your tests automated very, very quickly, which is a very efficient way to do it. And it avoids all the kind of challenges of trying to build all the unit tests and everything. The other thing I would say is, you don't have to unit test everything. You can just, if there's a specific area of code that you need to work through, there's nothing stopping you building a unit test just for that specific area. Put in a few use cases for it, and then run it and start building a set of unit tests as you go along, and doing the two bits in tandem. So you can just have, say, 20 unit tests for the critical areas that you're making big code changes to make sure they're working, to go through the changes and the updates that you want to do, and then make sure they're working afterwards. The other thing that I'd say is definitely worth having a look at if you're doing any unit tests, or you're doing any testing of a system where you've got data involved and you want to be able to check the data that's being churned through and updating. One of the most critical things is you always have the same start point. And the Docker integration that we have now, and being able to use some Docker images to set up a database and to have your database file there and ready to run the tests against, so you can then be checking that you're seeing the same input and output all the way through. That's definitely something worth having a look at. And Malcolm Groves did an introduction to Docker about a year ago now, and that was really, really good. He was showing how testing his system using multiple different database backends, setting that up and getting it going. So if you're not familiar with Docker and containerization, that's a really soft way to kind of get introduced to it, and also to maybe add a few unit tests into the code. But again, I definitely have a look at the Ranorex stuff and testing the UI and using it from that side rather than the back end, if that makes more sense, especially if you need to scale up something quickly and you've got people who can help you do that along the way. Okay, so who's got the next question down? So there's a question here about benefit of compiling between 64-bit and 32-bit. So as part of the migration, if you're looking at getting to 64-bit, obviously 64-bit opens up a lot more memory that your applications can use. Most applications are now, or most machines now are 64-bit enabled. And if they're running anything more than 4 gig of memory, then if you want to access into that, then you need to be running a 64-bit version. Now, from Windows' point of view, they do a very good job of running 64-bit and 32-bit on the same operating system. They're in fact running 2 operating systems together at the same time. Apple have taken the decision to cut back to 64-bit only. iOS is 64-bit only now in terms of what you're submitting through. Android have taken the leap to say we really want to start pushing everything towards 64-bit. Part of that is going to be looking at the long-term maintainability of their platforms. It feels like the wind is blowing in that direction a little bit for Microsoft as well. But they've done a great job of maintaining both 32 and 64-bit for as long as we can remember. So the benefits, you don't want to get caught out.
And what Stephen said, we have a nice technical white paper on the business case for 64-bit, from a business perspective. So let me see if I can put the link in here for you. And we have our nice DocWiki page, converting 32-bit Delphi apps to 64-bit Windows. It highlights the few items to consider going from a Windows 32-bit app to a 64-bit app. But for your specific question, is a nice impact of 64-bit technology on business. So it's a good white paper to read to find out the compelling reasons from a business case on why you want to migrate your 32-bit apps to 64-bit apps. All right, I have the link now. Let me answer it to that question.
Cool. Couple of random kind of questions. Just on books. Jay Kelly Wilson here saying he really recommends the High Performance Delphi book. If you're kind of looking to get out or use some of the benefits of the language and the updates, that's definitely worth having a look at. And probably one of the other things I'd say about migration is that there's been so much come into the language over the recent years, and a lot of people who are moving up from pre-generics and all the other stuff that's kind of come in since then, being able to move in, start using generics, the parallel programming library, even just taking advantage of the T-parallel 4 loop construct. There's a number of quick wins that you can put into your application to speed up the code in the back end, which is really useful once you've got the migration done and working. There's some great optimizations that you can work in, that's definitely something that's kind of worth looking into. And things like the High Performance Delphi book are a good place to kind of start looking into some of those bits as well. There's another comment here about it's great to see so many books being released recently around Delphi. Shows a great resurgence around the language. Yeah, absolutely. That's very true, Roland. There's some great books coming through, and great to see not only the books, but also the kind of the great adoption that we're getting around the community edition, and also with the schools as well. We've had dedicated sessions on education yesterday. There's a panel session tomorrow about Delphi and education. I've done a lot of work with the guys down in South Africa. We've had a lot of stuff going on in Russia and some of the other countries as well now, which is great to see. Where Delphi is the language of choice for the education sector, which is brilliant. So
I'm seeing one question: HTTPS support on REST client on Windows 7, the easy way. So I believe our REST client library does support both HTTP and HTTPS. Yeah, I believe that to be true. So you can use the REST client libraries that come with Delphi to support both HTTPS and HTTP. And I don't think whether it's Windows 7 or Windows 8 or Windows 10 makes a difference, unless I'm missing something.
No, I can think of. There's a question here from Carlos. Is stuck using an old text data set in Delphi 7 application. He's having problems getting it up to Delphi 10. I see you've sent a link over already. So if you do get stuck on these kind of things, then feel free to reach out to us. We can often point you in the right direction, especially if it's stopping you getting upgraded from an older version. We also have our professional services team to help along the way. But also, if you're on an active support contract, then our support team are very good at helping point you in the right direction. And if you're struggling getting something to work, or you're trying to find the alternative for something, then they can also be quite useful to point you in the right direction. So there's a number of great options, and especially now, one of the great things with the shift of the model, and it does enable us to help with the migrations in a lot better way, is having the support and maintenance bundled in with the product now, and having that more kind of a subscription-based model in essence does make it a lot easier for us to be able to share what's happening on the roadmap, and also to kind of look around the kind of the different options and have access into the support team to help you kind of get moving on things where you get stuck as well. So very much great update to the way things are done to help you, which you may not be aware of if you're kind of coming back into the fold from having been out for a number of years, or if you kind of been developing Delphi for a few years and you'd be quite used to it. So always worth mentioning that kind of stuff is as part of the product now, and being able to get the updates and anything that comes through is really kind of cool. So
I see the question on, can we make automatic upgrade of projects between versions? Well, I know if you open up an old DPR or DProj in the current newer versions, it'll automatically update the project file for you. I think the question really says, can we automatically make all the changes that need to be made going from an older version of the Delphi to a newer version, like forms. Like I said, once again I rely on the compiler to let me know what errors it sees and or what warnings it sees. And even when you try to open up an old Delphi form in a current version of Delphi, just the opening of that form will let you know what's missing from that form, or again, if some identity or some property is no longer there, and at least it points you to the file or the form that's causing the problem, allowing you to open up that form and search for that missing identifier or search for that missing property and replace it with the newer version for that property that may have been deprecated, going from, let's say, a Delphi 7 to a Delphi 10. All right, I think we've gone through most, if not all, of the questions by now.
Yeah, we're getting there. I say there's quite a few questions that have been coming through. I'm trying to kind of keep up with everything because we've been going down. So if we haven't managed to kind of get to your question, then I'm sorry for that. I have just kind of pushed up a poll just to kind of find out what version of Delphi you guys are up and running on. And about 25% of you have voted so far. So please go ahead and just kind of click on the screen, let us know what you're using and where you're at. It's always good to kind of get a feel for what everybody's doing and using. See quite a few of you already on 10 point something, which is good. So been through most of the pain. Quite honestly, moving through versions, 10 point something up to the next version, I found very easy, and it's got a lot easier in recent years, especially with the things like the Get It Package Manager. So if you're not familiar with the Get It Package Manager, then in the IDE, you can go to Tools, Get It Package Manager, and it opens up and lists a whole host of our favorite components that are out there that are hosted, and you can literally install them directly from the IDE without having to go anywhere, download them, put them somewhere. You don't have to update all the paths. You don't have to do all that kind of sluggish work that took ages and ages and ages to do in the past. I remember kind of migrating from version of Delphi to another version in the past used to take me kind of best part of a day to get done. And now it's a lot easier with the Get It package manager around. So things like that within the IDE are there and updated and helping. If you have any specific requirements around the IDE, things that we can do to help improve your workflow and getting migrated through. I know David Millington's always happy to hear what you guys are after. So please do kind of put that through. So I'm going to give it another few seconds, and then we'll get the poll closed down, and we'll share up so you can see what everybody's using at the moment.
So I thought I was unmuted a few times here. We are top of the hour, so we do need to wrap up, but this
Okay.
is great. Thank you to you three for putting this together, answer everybody's questions and stuff, and really appreciate it.
Okay, Jim, and yeah,
encourage everybody to join us tomorrow. Okay, back to you. Sorry.
That's okay. I was just going to say, I'll quickly just flash up here. Obviously, we've had a look at the Embarcadero YouTube channel. There's some really good stuff up there, videos to help you through migration and so on, which we had a look at earlier. Just a quick link to some of the key resources.
Hey, Stephen, you got to switch off of the poll slide back to the regular slides.
Okay. Sorry. There we are. Thanks, Al.
Okay.
So yeah, we mentioned the YouTube channel. In terms of automation around migration, we've mentioned Refined. There's the Delphi parser, which is available. That's out there, which is pretty cool. We shared the link in the chat for the Unicode analysis tool. The string to ANSI string converter tool, which is quite useful. Again, that's
an interesting tool, because I mentioned, we see a lot of customers who say, hey, my application can stay English only, it doesn't have to be Unicode. If that's the case, great. There's this wonderful utility called string to ANSI string converter tool, created by one of our MVPs, that converts all of your strings back to ANSI strings, all of your chars back to ANSI char, making it a non-Unicode English only application. So if that's your case, that's a useful tool to have.
Yeah, well, we'll put these links up onto a blog post and get them shared with everybody after the event. The other one that I know Mary loves is the interbase data bump, which is very, very useful. The BD to FIDAC, obviously, there's some great stuff up in DocWiki. The online documentation, there's some really good stuff in there as well to help you along the way. And we mentioned the third-party components part. The getitnow.embarcadero.com is a great place to go to see all the components that are in Get It. So if you want to go and search them online, you can go do that before you kind of look at downloading and installing. And then, yeah, we mentioned the MIDA converter.
Yeah, still a few folks out there who are still using the old Midas COM-based solution for middle tier. Want to know, how do I upgrade it to data snap? So this link has 4 wonderful white paper resources, stepping you through how do you migrate off of Midas to data snap. So it's useful if that's your case.
Cool. And we mentioned about the kind of the top 5 tips, which we kind of went through earlier. So yeah, I think we're done there, Jim. Sorry, I just wanted to share those bits because I know we've had quite a few questions around some of those areas. So hopefully people managed to screen grab those, and if not, you'll be able to catch it in the recording or check out the blog post that we'll put up over the next few days.
You're no problem. You're fine. So if you paste the links into the chat window, then they'll show up for everybody as well. And also, this will be on. Will it be on your blog on blogs.embarcadero.com, Stephen? They'll find those.
Yeah, we'll get it up onto the blogs.embarcadero.com. So yeah.
So just look for you on there, and they should find it.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you so much, and for this, and thanks everybody for joining us. And we will catch you all tomorrow for the next day, last day of DelphiCon. It's been great. So appreciate everybody.
All right. Thank you all for attending. Everybody stay healthy and stay safe until we meet again.
Yes, absolutely. All right, bye, everybody.
Cheers. Thanks, everyone.